Okay, everybody, welcome into our new show. Well, it's kind of like a special show here. Normally at about this time, you're hearing from Sonny Clark and the Couch Potato Sports Show and or working with our wrestling promotion of SOAR Championship Wrestling. However, sports has been a little bit on the lag right now. There is some sports news, don't get me wrong, but really, and also wrestling as that is about ready to kick back into it. I'll give you an update on that a little bit. But a lot of people that are normally watching this show right about now are looking for sports or wrestling or whatever the case may be. However, I don't even know how to hardly describe what has been going on for the last 4 nights over all across this country as far as what has happened regarding the social injustices and things of that sort. We've seen the protests all over the country. So what I decided to do is I thought I'd bring someone in that's a lot smarter than me. And I probably use the word expert, probably more in the fact just to let everybody know he's smarter than me. And I just want to let everybody know a little bit about my guest that I'm bringing on here. Back in the 90s when I was out in Arizona, I worked outside. I did a lot of work outside. I had the old cassette and radio thing in the ears, and I was always listening to sports talk radio at that time. And it was beginning to explode back in the day, at least in Phoenix around 95, 97, 98, somewhere in that, right in that area. And my guest had a show on sports talk radio in Phoenix from, if I'm not mistaken, from noon to 2, if I'm not mistaken, and it was called Loose Cannons. And this was the original Loose Cannons. There's a Loose Cannons as far as ESPN is concerned, but there's nothing like having the original Loose Cannon. That would be John Cannon. And here he is, John Cannon. Good to see you this morning. And I didn't put my earphones on, so hopefully I won't have the echoes. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Sonny, and I really appreciate you reminding me how you and I came in contact with each other, because it's been so long, I couldn't remember. I remember doing some radio hits with you probably 10 years ago, but I thought maybe there was a Phoenix connection,
Yep.
But it's just been a really long time.
Yes, it has. And a lot of times as we're doing the show and maybe catching up with you, not wanting to intrude on your time, but more in the fact I've seen and watched since we did make the connection back up on Facebook. And that was mainly as I was looking at Arnie Spanier and some of the big names in radio back in the day as far as sports talk radio is concerned. You, Arnie Spanier, and even Wild Bill. I wish I always found out where Wild Bill was. I have no clue where he is. But
one guy I have not been able to find that. Somehow Google does not even know where that guy is. I mean, it is amazing how off the grid Bill is. Bill Brindley, please come home.
Yeah, definitely. And that being said, also now that being said, listening back to Loose Cannons back in the day, I didn't always agree with John Cannon. Matter of fact, it was a lot of times totally opposite, but it always made me think. And that's one of the reasons why I liked Loose Cannons. And it's another reason why I liked Arnie Spanier back in the day over in Phoenix. And getting back with him, following him on his page, on his Facebook page, and especially last 2 to 3 months, he is rock solid on a lot of opinions, a lot of things that have been going on in the world today. So I thought I'd bring him on. And he's from, he started in Phoenix. I thought he was still in California, but no, he is over in Iowa. What made you go from California to Iowa?
Well, Sonny, we feel like we escaped, actually. And we had been trying to leave California since 2008, that terrible mini recession, whatever you want to call it, hit me pretty hard. I'm in the mortgage business now. I do mortgage loans, and I started in 2002, which at 2002, 3, 4, 5, it was great. My money was falling out of the sky. I was making more in a month than I'd made in a year doing sports radio. And I thought, oh, this is how this is going to be forever. And then '07 happened and it got bad, and '08 happened and it got terrible. Um, and we started to think about, we got to get out of here because this is not sustainable. You buy a house for a lot of money, and you think, okay, we weren't 20. We were
Right.
we were going to be in that loan for a really long time. And how do you retire with a house payment like that and with a tax payment like that? So we thought, okay, we got to get out. And my wife is a college professor, and we figured out they kind of make the same amount of money everywhere. And so we thought, well, let's go someplace where the amount of money that you make is going to be significant, where here in the Bay Area, it's not. And then whatever I make will be extra. And so we kind of put a plan together, and she was a finalist for 6 jobs in 6 years and never got the gig because she didn't have a PhD. And she would always tell them, I don't have a PhD. And they'd say, oh, come on anyway. We really, we love your resume, and we want to meet you. And so she'd fly across the country, teach for a day, meet everybody for a day, fly home, and then 3 or 4 months later find out she didn't get the job because somebody else had a PhD. So finally, she got one of these jobs, and it was here in Des Moines, Iowa. And so we moved here. And now she teaches at Iowa State University up in Ames. And we really, like I said, when we left California, the place was on fire. There was no water to put it out, and no help on the horizon, and nothing that's happened in California in the years since we've left, which is 5 years now, has made me wish that I still lived there. Although I have to say I'm proud of the way they've handled the COVID thing, especially San Francisco and the Bay Area. Really got out ahead of it. They had their first stay-at-home order, I think, in February, and so they've had far less cases there than in most cities that size. So I'm proud of that. And I'm following the Warriors and the Giants when they play, and the Niners this last year was fun. But no, you can have it.
Yeah, a culture shock going from, Phoenix to California, kind of like the same, I would think, and I would imagine. And then you get to Iowa. Like when I went from Phoenix to Dallas, a complete culture shock, nothing I completely expected at all, especially since football is God and it's too hot in reality in Phoenix to even watch football, even high school football for that matters. But a lot of big culture shock from going from California over to Iowa.
Yes, absolutely. And because I am still in the mortgage business, and because I have always kept my California license, and now I'm actually working for a company where I'm licensed in all 50 states.
Oh, wow.
I had 1 foot literally still in California and 1 foot here. And I would pick up the phone and talk to somebody that was refinancing a $1.3 million loan on a $4 million house, and hang up the phone and pick up a first-time home buyer that's going to buy a house for $87,000, and I was going back and forth, and so that I did have some mental whiplash, and it took me a while to get that figured out. But now I'm very happily doing loans here and in California, and when I have friends in other parts, I've done a couple loans for my cousin in Dallas, and I've got a loan going in San Antonio right now. So if you know anybody that is looking to refinance or purchase, I can help them anywhere they are, and
Definitely.
Talk sports while we do it.
Absolutely. And sports and current affairs. And again, over the years in listening to you on Sports Talk Radio, then seeing you on Facebook and how you present yourself, when I said it in the post, there's not a lot of people I respect regarding that, and I respect your opinions. And again, we don't agree a lot on those opinions, but that doesn't mean that I can't listen to the other side. So, guys, if you do want to get a hold of John Cannon, see what he has to say. Right on the bottom there is his Facebook page. Find it. I don't think you'll be disappointed because he's got some great opinions and things of that sort. And he'll make you think on the other side, which is one of the reasons why I like it. And it's one of the reasons why I brought him on this show, and I consider him expert. Let's start with a little bit of the COVID. You talked a little bit about what was going on in San Francisco, their handling of it. All over the world, COVID is obviously the big story before 4 days ago. So looking at COVID and how the United States is handling it compared to other countries. Now, granted, the United States is a lot bigger than a lot of those other countries, and those numbers are going to be a lot bigger because of the population. But when you look at how the United States is handling the COVID situation compared to other countries, how do you think the United States measures up with their attack of this?
Well, it depends on what countries you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to Brazil, we're right along there. We've done very much what Brazil has done, which is why Brazil has, I think, the highest number of cases in the world, and they're chasing us. What I like to do, Sonny, is compare how we have handled this to how we handled Ebola. And Ebola, very contagious disease, a more brutal disease, if that's even possible, in terms of the way people died from Ebola was really bad and made it even more transmissible and more contagious. And when that started to show up, we sent people to the country where it was. And we sent people to teach the people there how to handle it, how to keep it from being transmitted, how to treat it, and how to prevent it. And while that was going on, we also had the FAA structure things so flights could not come from that part of the world except through a few airports here in the US. And everybody coming in from those countries had to be screened when they got to the airport. One person slipped through that, and they got Ebola, and they had Ebola when they got here, and they died from it. The two people who treated them here in the U.S. were the only other 2 cases of Ebola in the U.S., and both of them survived. So here, we did the exact opposite. We got word in January that it was happening. We didn't shut down travel from that part of the world for a long time, and then we shut down travel from China, but not from Europe, where it had really already gotten a foothold. And then you look at places in the U.S., New York and the West Coast, and where travel from that part of the world is so prevalent, and it was out of the gate before we did anything. We knew how to stop it. There was literally a playbook for it.
Sure.
We didn't pay attention to that, and 100,000 people have died, and it's not even close to over, Sonny. And that's the concerning thing for me, is that when I go outside now, my wife and I go for walks almost every night, it feels here like it's over. It feels very different than 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. There's a lot more activity outside. There are people. What's that?
Is that a mistake? I'm going to jump.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what I thought.
This is families getting together, but they're extended families, right? They're not just the nuclear family. These are people. All of a sudden, there'll be 5 cars in driveways and around. Somebody's having a birthday party. Somebody's having. Mother's Day was a big thing that caused a spike in a lot of places. People just had to get together, and then they hug, they share food, they do all the things that the CDC says not to do, and then they go back home to their areas, and they bring it back with them. So it's demoralizing to sit here and watch this happen when the experts have all said this is what would happen. And I believe we didn't lock down soon enough, we didn't lock down tight enough, and then we released too soon. Here in Iowa, we were one of the last states to lock down. Never really locked down. We just kind of guidelines. Guidelines were to watch yourself, wear a mask. We trust Iowans to do the right thing. Oh my God, not if you see them out in their driveways. And now we're one of the first states to lift restrictions.
Yes.
To the point where right now we're wide open. I don't think anything is still restricted except by businesses that don't feel ready to open yet, and by people who are not ready to go out yet. But those are the only restrictions, is really people deciding they're not ready.
When I look at, I actually just Thursday decided that I was going to go out to lunch. And I went to a local restaurant here in the Dallas area, and how they were doing it as far as the social distancing. I went and seen a friend of mine that I hadn't seen 4 months. And I think I understand being away from people that you love, being away from people that you care about. And they might not be in, like you said, your nuclear family right there in your own home. And you sort of miss, instead of doing what we're doing, the video thing, there's always something about being around someone that you love. Is it a mistake, in your opinion, is it a mistake now for the opening of restaurants and things like that and the gatherings that are going on now? Do you think it's too soon for that? Because
absolutely.
As you said, the country didn't shut down fast enough, and that is something based upon going back to the Ebola that you were talking about, how they shut it down and shut it down quick. Why do you think that wasn't done? What was the reason why this country did not shut down as fast as it could to prevent what we're seeing now, which is over 100,000 dead?
Sonny, every decision made by this country about this disease has come down to one thing, and that is Donald Trump's reelection in November. That is the only thing that has mattered. It's why he didn't want to talk about this when he first found out about it. He thought that it would be bad, and that's why we don't have testing. We should have testing. It's why we don't have personal protective equipment for people who need it, because he believed that to have that would admit a weakness. It's really right out of the old time dictator playbook, the communist China, communist Russia, where Russia, even after they were communist, they did not, where HIV was concerned, they were sending money to World AIDS organizations when they had a big AIDS problem in their own country, but they didn't want people to know they had a problem in their own country. And they figure, okay, if we send money to the World Health Organization, we'll seem like we've got ours under control and we've got extra money for this. And that's what we are doing. In fact, we just sent N95 masks to Russia and PPE to Russia at our expense, taxpayer expense, when we have health providers here in the country that don't have it, because it's all about image for Trump. It's all about the election. You better believe we'll have a vaccine by October. Will it work? Would you take it? I won't take it. Experts say 12 to 18 months to test a vaccine. I'm going to call it the election vaccine, because that's all it's for, is so he can say, we have a vaccine, vote for me. And you know what? There are a lot of people who will. And that's the really sad part, is that this guy that has been a liar in his whole life, not just as a president, this guy has never told the truth. People say, oh, I voted for him because he's a businessman. 4 bankruptcies, 3,000 lost lawsuits, where those are just the people that had the money to stay in it with him until the finish.
Right.
Most people couldn't. Most people that he screwed by not paying his bills when he hired them to do work, they didn't have the money to do that. So not even counting those, he's lost 3,000 lawsuits as a businessman. Won't provide tax returns to show really what kind of businessman he is. And all those things were troublesome. They were a nuisance. The way his team came in, and I remember reading a story years ago by Michael Lewis, such a great writer, about the FDA and all the things that the FDA does. And it's like hundreds of things the FDA oversees. And the Obama people compiled binders and binders and binders on all these subjects of different things that had to be done to keep the country moving like it should. Trump's people didn't look at any of it. We got this. We got this. And it's been that way since the start.
Confident arrogance. I mean, that he is. Now, granted, that's what, if you want to call Trump a success, that's what made him a quote unquote success, is that that confidence that he has, that he thinks he knows better. And you go back to what you were talking about as far as the cure, going ahead and finding the cure, and you say you won't take it. And I know a lot of people that right now are going to say, we are not going to take the vaccine of this. And it's one reason and I've never seen it in this country, of such of a disrespect of the government handling of a situation as this one. And that's why people are not going to trust it. That's the reason why people are afraid of it. And I wonder, some Republicans are not even interested in this because they don't trust it, because it doesn't look like it was handled, at least when I'm looking at it. It doesn't seem like it has been handled properly, especially if you go back to the Obama administration and how they handled Ebola,
H1N1, SARS. I mean, they learned from those situations, and they learned a lot, and they figured a lot out. And Trump has been uninterested in any of that, because it's all about his election, and this Attorney General William Barr is devastating to our democracy. The things that he's doing, I don't know if you heard, because they're doing this now under the cover of COVID and these riots, but they asked for the resignation of the top guy at the FBI who was involved in the Russia investigation. They're drumming out all the FBI people that were involved in the Russia investigation. This guy, 38 years in the FBI. How many different presidents did he work for? How many different parties? Two parties, many times he worked for. And they're getting rid of him because he worked on the Russia investigation. It's the country's being hijacked, Sonny, and that can take us to this protests. It's interesting that this one police murder sparked all of this, but you could see it coming.
Yep.
You could see the frustration starting really with the Mueller report, which, it was devastating when Bob Mueller came out and basically said, here's my report, read it. Didn't talk about it for a half hour on TV. Didn't state things. He talked about it for 9 minutes, I think. And then it was up to us to read 400 pages, which, by the way, America is not going to do.
Yep, they won't. If they won't read the deal about 9/11 and the close down of the security and letting the government take over, what makes you think they're going to read this document?
Yeah, no. So starting with that, and then moving toward Barr being, he had been in place just before that, and then since then they have just done thing after thing after thing to fire all the inspectors general. Get rid of all the safeguards. We're supposed to have safeguards on this government. That's the irony is that it's really been the Republicans and it's been Fox News that have hammered for 20 years that the government and the media should not be trusted, and it's worked.
Yep.
But it is the Republicans that are doing these things within the government, and the media that is trying to let people know about these things that are being done is not being trusted by the Republicans mostly, and it's a mess, Sonny. And I'll tell you, I'm an optimist from the word go.
Yes, you are.
I don't see a way out of this, even if Trump is defeated in November. And really, before that, you have to say if we have an election in November. I'll tell you something else, Sonny. The night he was elected, which was a very dark night in my house.
Yes.
Very dark. Although I cannot say that I saw all of this coming. I really didn't, because I believed that it was only 1/3 of the government. And I believed that what my Republican friends told me was that the people around him will keep him from really doing anything crazy. I believed that. Turned out to be completely false. They've let this guy do whatever he wants.
The word tyrant comes involved immediately.
Yeah, he's a dictator.
Yeah,
absolutely. He's like a 7-year-old, really. I mean, he is. He's a 7-year-old in a 71-year-old body that wants what he wants when he wants it, has no patience for for being told no. Anyway, I said to my wife, those guys who were shocked that they won, shocked, are in a room right now trying to figure out how to never have another election. I said that to my wife the night he was elected. And I can see it. I can see him coming out soon and saying, with everything going on the way with the COVID, with these we can't, it's not stable enough to have an election right now. I can see it.
It's interesting that you say that, because you think about that as the way that it's set up, just the way that you set it up. COVID, what's going on as far as the racial tensions all over our country, and then making an executive decision, to say no to the election. Take a step back. Let's say if there is an election. Number one, I think as far as when you look at President Trump and the radical tendencies that he's shown, not only in just the COVID, but even now. And I think by his silence, he's actually being kind of radical. And then the actions in the world, and all over the world, and then the racial undertones that he uses a lot. I wonder if people actually believe what he said to the family of Mr. Floyd. I don't believe him, because guess what? Our country has decided to let this president stand up and not be honest, and no one seems to care or hold him accountable. And so I can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. So the question is do you think that he's going to win this election? I mean, look, we got COVID, we got this, the racial thing. How can this guy win the presidency after what seems to be this country falling apart?
Well, logistically, he never should have won the last one.
That's
I mean,
true.
really, however you felt about Hillary Clinton, she was 10 points ahead in every state until that Comey letter came out.
Right, that's correct.
And it was too late for her to recover from that.
Yep.
That was the thing. Now, they didn't run a good campaign. She didn't go to Michigan, blah, blah. There's all those different, and people hate her, which is one of the most unfair things I think ever. There's never been anyone more qualified to be president who was running for president than Hillary Clinton. And that's just the truth.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah. And I mean, she was much more qualified than Obama was when he ran in 2008. And really, after his first few months, I was thinking I should have backed Clinton. I didn't. I backed Obama, but I was really thinking he's too green. Now he got up to speed, but he spent a lot of time that first year with a healthcare plan, and then suddenly Ted Kennedy died. He lost his supermajority in the Senate, and he couldn't get anything done the rest of the time he was in office because the Republicans filibustered every single thing. So people go, "Oh, that Obama, he didn't do anything." He did what he could. A lot of liberals don't think he did enough. He wasn't liberal enough. They didn't think Al Gore was liberal enough. And look how that turned out. We wound up with Bush. So they didn't think Clinton was liberal enough. And so they voted for Jill Stein and they voted for Gary Johnson. And those votes were enough to give the presidency to Donald Trump. So you can't rule anything out. And especially when the Russians are trying so hard to use social media to sow this distrust in the real media, so that even when the real media exposes Trump for these things, there's 40% of the people that just won't believe it. Now, if you're watching Fox News, you're in a different country. You are completely in a different country. You don't even know a third of the things that are going on, much less the studies and the investigations and what they turn up and the connections between Trump and Russia and other things. The whole impeachment. I mean, he was guilty. And the Senate would not say he was guilty. They would not. And how those guys sleep at night, I don't know. I really don't. But that's why Democrats and independents and Republicans who love this country and miss it the way it used to be, they've all got to not just vote for Joe Biden. They've got to work for Joe Biden, because people say, "Oh, I don't like Joe Biden." I don't really care. I mean, I really don't care.
That's compared to, I don't care what Trump is doing, compared to, God, I don't even care about it. I'd vote for Cookie Monster if he won, he won the way to get in. So,
I mean, Sonny, any vote that is not for Joe Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. Somebody stays home, that's a vote for Trump. Somebody votes for some third party candidate, that's a vote for Trump. That's what happened with Clinton, is that people said, "Oh, my dental hygienist, I had to teach my kids what a blowjob was because of her husband." That's why you didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. That's why she said, "What, I didn't vote for Trump." Well, you might as well have.
Yeah.
You didn't vote against him.
Interestingly enough, we had 3.5 years to find. Okay, let's say 3 years. We had 3 years to find a candidate. And before we move into what's going on right now, the last 4 days, I want to ask this question. We had 3 years to find a actual person that could actually stand up and look like he knows what he's doing. Stand up and do it. Why did this country not plead with Al Gore to try to run again? Now, I know Al Gore has said that he's not interested in that and everything else, but I think if he was talked to by the right people, that we could have had Al Gore on the ticket. Why do you think they did not approach Al Gore and say, "Get your butt in there, we need you"?
I think the problem the Democrats have is that their electorate is so fussy, and I don't think Al Gore would have won the nomination. I think he was tainted after that loss, and the whole Al Gore invented the internet thing, and there just were so many memes about Al Gore that I don't think he would have done it. And I think when you look at all the people who, I mean, very good candidates, several people that I would have been happy to be president of this country, that never had a chance in the primary, and I didn't support Biden until pretty late in the going, when so a friend of mine pointed out to me that he felt that Biden and Bloomberg were the only two that could stand on a debate stage with Trump and not get mowed over. And I think the feeling was Gore would have gotten mowed over by Donald Trump. Now, I believe, Sonny, that there should not be debates for the presidency. I don't believe that Biden should even engage in a debate with Trump. Why debate someone who will not tell the truth? What's the point?
Good point.
The whole idea of a debate is you get someone on the issues, you get them on the record as to what they think about an issue. Why would you do that with Donald Trump? There's no point to it.
I find it amazing in this day and age that we have decided to let our president be who he is. And now, when you look at the riots, Corona, the whole obstruction, how he wins this election, if they have it, is beyond me. But then again, we don't know what's going to show up in the ninth hour, like you talk about.
Exactly.
Hillary Clinton. There'll be something that'll show up in the final hour that could. So when people say that the elections are rigged and the mail-in elections, I don't trust either Democrats or Republicans in reality for mail-in ballots. What do you think about mail-in ballots?
I've been mailing in my ballot for years, Sonny. In California, we'd fill out an absentee ballot and actually we'd go and drop it in a slot. We wouldn't always mail it, but we'd go drop it in the slot. But we get Social Security checks through the mail. We pay our taxes, pay our income taxes through the mail. Some people do it electronically, but a lot of people do it through the mail. The mail is fine. There is no voter fraud in this country, in person or in the mail. That is a Republican fantasy that they've used to strip people of their voting rights. They purge the rolls in Georgia. This Brian Kemp, who's the governor in Georgia, they had a huge purge, hundreds of thousands of people that they took off the rolls just close enough to the election that there was no way to get them back on. They just do stuff like that. And then they yell about voter fraud. It's like, it really is amazing how everything that they accuse people of, they're doing.
Right.
And Trump accuses people of fraud, and his administration has been the most fraudulent, the most arrests since Nixon. They might have passed Nixon, they might not have. I'm not sure.
Yes, they did.
But Obama's presidency was a beacon of good behavior, both by the president and by everyone in his administration. And then this guy, it's been a dumpster fire from day one.
Yes, it has.
And that's okay with people. That's okay with 40% of the people in this country.
Yeah, I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. And it's one of those crazy things when you think about it. Now, silence and what's going on. We haven't really heard from Donald Trump. We got what's going on as far as the riots are concerned. Okay, let me take a step back. My question is, why are they calling these protests and not calling them riots? Okay, I'm the layman here. Okay, so maybe it's because I don't get it. But when I was going to Google and I put in LA riots, the only thing I got was Rodney King. Well, as soon as I put in protests, I got everything that I was looking for as far as information. Why are
I'll tell you.
Let me know, why are we saying protests more so than riots? Because most American thinks those are riots that are going on all over the country.
I believe, and I have not searched everyone, but the ones I know of in Minneapolis, here in Des Moines, and some other places, they have always started as peaceful protests.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets dark and the police want to move everybody out of the area. They increase their presence and people get upset. People start lobbing things at the police. Police respond with military tactics. I mean, Sonny, our police in this country has been militarized over the last 20 years in equipment, in armor that they wear, in tactics. They are no longer a community force to protect and to serve. They are a military, almost occupational force. And people get angry when they're out there, they're grieving, they're protesting, and then they get that, they're going to respond. So I believe the reason they're called protests is that's how they start. They turn into riots of the police. And it's tragic because so many of the businesses that are damaged or destroyed are businesses either owned by minorities or they serve a minority interest, they serve the community. And it's really sad. I think that part of this also is the COVID thing. People have been cooped up, pent up for all this time. And but I think you always have an element of lawlessness in situations like that. You have people, opportunists, who are going to go loot the Target. Target didn't do anything wrong, but hey, it's a chance to get a free TV. Let's go. And so I can't blame that all on Donald Trump, because that has always been the case. It was the case in LA. It's the case in Watts, right in Detroit in 68.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a president that does not follow the law, that believes he's above the law, that constantly does things that indicate that he's above the law, they either change the law to fit what he's already doing, or they just ignore it. It's really hard to tell people, hey, you know what? Don't go get that TV. Don't do that. You gotta follow the law. You gotta, when that election happened in 2016, my kids and I, when I drove them to school every day, we were listening to Sean Covey, who's Stephen Covey's son. Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Sean Covey has a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. And my kids were 12, and we were listening to that audio presentation in the car on the 20-minute drive to and from school every day. And then Donald Trump wins the presidency. I mean, Covey is all about do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because you might get caught doing the wrong thing. Do it because it's the right thing. And then a guy gets elected president who is the antithesis of that.
Absolutely.
What am I supposed to teach my kids? How do you deal with that? How do you stop schoolyard bullies when the president's a bully? So these people who have been bullied and oppressed and have been the most affected by COVID economically and in terms of health, and now they got another guy killed, another unarmed man killed by a group of police officers. They've had it.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell them that they've got anything to lose. They don't feel like they have anything to lose. And when you have a populace that does not think it has something to lose, you've got a revolution on your hands.
And the amazing thing about that is if you go back to Rodney King, most of those riots were right there in LA. It's amazing how this one has swept across the country. And, the other one that really has brought this country to where it is the shooting where a former authority, being a police officer or sheriff or whatever the case, I forget the young man's name, that they just shot down while he was running down the street.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that really took this thing to the brim, and it was right there. It was like the max of what this country could handle. And then,
right. Well, and there was a woman in Atlanta like 2 weeks ago
shot in her hole.
Police burst into her apartment by mistake and killed her.
Yes.
And we got the guy right there in Dallas, the black man who was killed by the drunk woman police officer, and she practically got off, right? I mean, that's the other thing.
Yep.
Some of these officers don't even get fired.
Yeah.
Some of them get fired, but they don't stand trial. The ones that stand trial tend to get off or get very light sentences. People are sick of that.
Yeah, they are.
They really are.
Yep. And
I'm sick of it.
And the fact is that when you look at what's going on, you have a section of people where they feel like there is no justice done, and pretty much, and I go back to the day when I think about civil rights, and I think about it, and obviously one of the biggest back into our day is you go and you think about Martin Luther King and what this man did for what he was doing. And obviously we didn't have what's going on. I, being the layman, asked the question, he was able to do it without what we are seeing today. What has to happen? Do some of the big people in the world have to step up and say, "Hey guys, we need to knock it off. We got to get back to civilization." Or how do you think this stops? I guess is the question I have.
Dude, I like I said, I'm an optimist, but I don't know, and I will tell you, I think the difference. The difference is that in 1965, when Dr. King was doing what he was doing, people were willing to follow a leader, and he was a great leader. And people were willing to stand there in Alabama with police dogs nipping at them, with fire hoses turned on them.
Yep.
And they were willing to take that and not retaliate and not make it violent. People said they were nonviolent protests. They sure weren't nonviolent police presences there.
That's true.
But now everybody, Sonny, and really sports radio is part of the problem here, starting 20 years ago, like you said. Everybody has an opinion.
Absolutely.
Everybody's opinion gets out there. It's a comment on the bottom of a news story. It's a call into a radio show. It's Twitter feed. It's whatever. Everybody has an opinion, and I don't think people are willing anymore to say, you know what, Dr. King's the expert here. He knows how to do this. Let's do what he says. People aren't willing. People are like, no, I know what to do. And what I'm going to do is throw a rock at that police car because he threw a rock at me. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think the way our civilization has gone, and with social media and everybody's opinion suddenly mattering. Mm-hmm. When I started in radio, and now I'm going to really this is going to be a get off my lawn moment. So be ready for that, okay? When I started in radio, the guy in the radio was smarter than the people listening to the radio. You had to be.
Right.
To get the gig, you had to be. Maybe I should say 10 years before. When I was listening to radio, coming up wanting to be in radio, that's how it was.
Right.
When I got on the radio, I really can't say that. I mean, was Arnie Spanier smarter than people who were listening to him? He was shrewd. He knew how to build an audience.
Absolutely.
He knew how to frame an opinion to make people hate him. I mean, he was in Phoenix telling people how great the Knicks were and how much the Sun sucked every day. And people would call him up and tell him that he was wrong. Arnie, you're wrong. You know, I mean, and he would laugh and laugh at these people. Mm-hmm. And then one of the Jim Rome, who's super smart.
Yes.
He built this thing where all these people would call in with their take, and he made it seem pretty easy to do. And so radio stations around the country were all looking for the next Jim Rome. Well, there ain't any others, you know? I mean, he's really smart, and he really knew how to build what he was building. But what you wound up with was a bunch of guys with opinions and nothing else on the radio, and nothing to back them up. And that's I always tried to back up an opinion that I had, or just come clean with the fact that I don't have a reason for this opinion. It's just my opinion. And so I always seemed like the reasonable guy, you know, and then people who really listened a lot would say, you know, John, you never changed your mind when somebody argued with you. And I'd say, well, you know, you're right. Because I pretty much had looked at a lot of stuff to figure out why I felt the way I felt. And very rarely, I wouldn't say never, but very rarely did someone throw something at me that really shook those fundamental beliefs. But now it's what you hear coming out of the radio in news and in sports is crap. Right. And so people do have a feeling, hey, I know more than that guy. And you know what? They do. Right. So they get a podcast or they do this or something like that. And now we got all these splintered media, you know, presentations going on out there. And there's no marshaling force. There's no radio station everyone listens to where a Dr. King could get on and say, look, we're going to do this. We're going to do it calmly. We're going to do it peacefully. The police are going to respond and we're not going to respond back. Let's go. Well, we don't have that. There's no way to get that word out now.
I wonder when I think about it, you know, just taking a step back, you know, we talked about Dr. King and what he could get done. And you're talking about how people are reacting now compared to, I wonder in the back of my mind is that they've seen what Dr. King did and seen what happened, Rodney King, seeing what's been going on, and they feel like it's just not being heard. And maybe I'm wondering the reason why it's not so secluded like in Minneapolis when this happened. How it's spreading across the country is the statement that's being made is you are not listening to us. And I wonder if that's what it is, more so that maybe they didn't respect what Dr. King did back in the day, or anybody else who took the step forward to say. Now, obviously, Dr. King was 2 years before my existence. I was born in '67, so I'm 53 years old. I'm sitting here just going over what I know, but obviously, the things that have happened to this point, it got to the point where it was right at the level, and then something got in it to take it over the side of the borders around in just one area to where this was the final straw. And I wonder if they feel like the job wasn't being done before them today.
Well, I think certainly they feel like something has to change this, that there has to be something bigger. What Dr. King was doing was obviously enormous, but that you needed you need protests in each of these areas. I agree with that, because each of these areas have these police forces that have had these problems. I mean, this is not, Minneapolis has had a bunch of them, don't get me wrong, but Atlanta, Chicago, here in Des Moines, and it always comes back to the same thing, which is profiling and police who are trained. Many of them are former military, Sonny, many of them. And I had another guy tell me something interesting about police work a few years ago. He said, police grow up like this.
Absolutely.
They're not talking to people as teens and as college students and as young adults. They're like this, or they're video gaming, right? And now they're in a conflict resolution position.
Right.
Supposed to be conflict resolution. That's really what the police job is.
Yeah.
They're not trained for that. They didn't grow up learning body language, speech patterns, ways you can diffuse energy from a confrontation. They don't know that. They're trained in the military. Military is not about conflict resolution. Military is about, you do what I want or I'm going to kill you. And many of them bring that, whether it's instinctive by that time or just whatever, they bring that to their police work. And I think that's a big part of the problem everywhere in the country. There aren't enough.
I saw that in your comments. I thought it was like dead on. And we complain. Old people, I consider myself old. Old people complain that people don't get it. And all they do is got their face in their. Believe me, I stand accused of being that person. Like, why can't you just put down the phone and talk to someone's, face to face? And or you have the extreme of, former military people coming into the police force. Now, I'm not necessarily against that, but like you said, I think there's a different type of training that you have to go through to be more tolerant, more so maybe that we don't see the type of actions that we're seeing today.
Well, and I think that is part of the problem too, and it's not just the training, it's the weaponization of the police force. And I think for the first place we really saw this was Ferguson, where the police there had all this armor and they were just moving down streets, mowing down people, and it was because the police force there had purchased all these military goods, and that's where money is going in police forces right now. It's not going into training, and it's not going even into having more officers. It's going into these tanks. I mean, police departments have tanks now. How is that going to be a conflict resolution vehicle? So that those, what we've done, we've identified the problem, but do we have a solution? No. The solution to this is going to be, unfortunately, people are going to have to get out of the damn street. I don't think there's any way around it. They're not going to win in the street. And they need to see that, or they need to do their demonstrations in the daytime and then get out of there before the hoodlums come out. And now, did you see the video? I know I posted it, and I'm sure a lot of people did, about the guy knocking out the Office Depot windows in Minneapolis.
And was he a cop, or was he, there's speculation that was a police officer, trying to, I don't even know what he would be trying to do, but what he was trying to do,
I think was pretty clear. He was trying to do physical damage that would be blamed on protesters.
Right.
And I think this has been a concerted effort. And there was another shot I saw of a person doing a similar thing that actually had a little IFB, an interrupted feedback headphone under his hat that you could see.
Mhm.
And this is a coordinated effort to make these protests seem more violent than they really are, and to keep the protesters from gaining public opinion and traction in terms of changing things here in the country. So, I mean, you would think, okay, white cops killing unarmed black people, bad, right? I mean, who's going to fight for that? Who's going to argue that that's an okay thing, right? Nobody. And yet, when you actually try to move against that, there's pushback. There's people saying, no, you can't change that. It's like, why? This is not the country that we were 20 years ago. It just isn't.
Do you think Donald Trump's, you going back to him just really quick, do you think his attitude towards, obviously a lot of people think that he's racist, at least has the underlying, intolerance or doesn't care. Do you think that fuels this fire, that the president of our country does not even care?
It absolutely does. And I'm actually going to read you something from CNN.
Okay.
A serious divide has emerged among Donald Trump's top allies and advisors over how the president should address several nights of protests and riots across the nation.
Got it.
Trump is being urged by some advisors to formally address the nation and call for calm, while others have said he should condemn the rioting and looting more forcefully or risk losing middle-of-the-road voters in November. So again, Sonny, everything coming out of that White House is about the election in November.
Absolutely.
He's not doing what he thinks is the right thing to do or the best thing to do. Not that he would know, because he's an idiot. But even when his advisors come to him, they're not saying, here's the best thing to do. Here's what the country needs right now. They're saying, here's how you're going to get elected in November. And because, let's face it, he needs some Hail Marys to get elected if there's an election. And so the advice he's getting is to win the election is going to be radical. And I think their decision, and Sonny, this was absolutely a decision in February when New York started to really inflame on the COVID thing. You know what? A bunch of people of color are dying. A bunch of Democrats are dying. Why should we worry about that? Who is dying in Louisiana? People in New Orleans, black people, brown people. Louisiana is already a state that the Republicans are probably going to win, but they're not in a hurry to go down and fix a problem that's just killing black and brown people. And you may say that I'm a wacko liberal for bringing that up, but their actions, you cannot point to their actions and say that did not happen.
Yep.
And I think, again, it's all about the election. When COVID started to show up, and now it is showing up more in southern states, in rural areas here in Iowa, but you know where it's showing up? Meatpacking plant. You know who works there? Mexicans.
Yep.
And they live 10 to an apartment, and they work side by side on these lines for hours at a time, which is what all the experts say. It's the amount of time you're exposed to someone who has it, and those people were told to go to work even when they were showing symptoms of COVID.
Yep.
And now hundreds are sick, dozens have died, and he doesn't care.
Yep.
So,
and the fact that you were talking about, he's losing the middle line because the middle line Republicans, some of them have been affected by COVID, have been affected by the tear downs of buildings and businesses that where people were really behind him, but all of a sudden now they're not in a situation where it benefits them to be Trump savvy. All right. So then now they lose their businesses. A lot of the Republicans, the ones you're talking about, that might cross the line, and or COVID closed down their businesses, and now they can't get out of it, and now they're in trouble. I think that's where the turn might end up happening, is because a lot of Republicans are getting getting the same short of the end of the stick as a lot of Democrats.
Well, I don't know. That's certainly possible, Sonny. This whole mask thing, we haven't even talked about this. There's obviously hours of conversation we could have about things,
Sure.
but the psychology of the mask, and how he has refused to wear a mask, and how when you go to a store that doesn't require masks, and some of them do.
Mm-hmm.
I like to shop in the ones that do.
Mm-hmm.
You're wearing a mask, and which basically a mask says, I care about you. I care about other people. I don't think I have it, but if I have it, this is going to keep my breath in my mouth or near my mouth. It's not going to save me if you have it and you breathe all over me, but it's going to make it less likely if I breathe on you that you're going to get it. People will not wear one.
Right.
Older people who should definitely wear one are not wearing one.
That's true.
And it's a social proof model, Sonny. If you go to a store and you're the only one not wearing a mask, you're going to wear one next time.
Absolutely.
But when you go to a store and there are a lot of other people also not wearing masks, you are reinforced in your belief that wearing a mask is stupid and it's weak and it's whatever. But unfortunately, and you know, I hate to make this prediction, but
John, though, I mean, because
what's that?
Is it the media's fault? Because everybody's blaming the media a lot on this. Well, what I look at as far as the media, whether it be Fox, whether it be CNN, or whatever the case, obviously they want their eyes to their product. Okay, so so the sensationalism of bringing the negative about what's going on as far as the protests are overwhelming the positive and the peaceful protests out there. So I just wonder to myself sometimes that if you have this type of thing, people are blaming the media about, just showing the negative. But the simple fact of the matter is if they don't show that as well, that they're dropping the ball. Well, are they showing it too much?
They can't win. They absolutely can't win. If they're trying to legitimately play it straight, the way you know that you're doing well in the media is that both sides are mad at you. That's kind of how you can tell that you're doing okay.
Right.
I was one of my first jobs out of college. I was the publicity director for a conference, and I went to a game between Southern Illinois and Drake, and I had traveled with the Southern Illinois people, and I sat with them for half the game, and I sat with Drake people for half the game. And I got back on Monday, and my commissioner got a phone call from the Drake people who really felt like I was pulling for Southern Illinois at the game, and they were really upset. And she came in and gave me a very stern talking to. Remember, this is my first job out of college. I was a young guy. And then about 2 hours later, her phone rings, and she comes into my office laughing. And she said, that was Southern Illinois, and they thought you were pulling for Drake. She said, that means you're doing a good job. Keep it up. So that's kind of the position the media is in right now, is if both sides are upset, then they're doing it right. But they got to keep it factual. They have reported that these protests started peacefully. They've reported that because I've read that. I know that. So they must have reported it. The media is impossible to put in a box because really of, I believe, Fox and right-wing talk radio. That is not a news organization or news organizations. In fact, when Fox's charter, when Fox started, Roger Ailes said, we will push, not even use the word push, he will promote the agenda of the Republican Party. That's what they said they would do. So they've never been a news organization. They have always been, the president was right from 2000 to 2008. The president was wrong from 2008 to 2016. The president has been right since 2016. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And anybody that really thinks they're watching news when they watch Fox is losing their mind. And I've seen numerous people on Facebook who said that, I saved my parents when I went into their house and I basically made it so their cable, they couldn't watch Fox News, and they started to watch other news, and they're like, their whole opinion changed about the world. Right. So so when people say the media is doing something, well, there is a part of the media that is pushing an agenda, and that is these great KDKA in Pittsburgh and WTMJ in Milwaukee, KMOX in St. Louis. These are 50,000 watt flamethrower stations that people have listened to for generations to get the news.
Yep.
And now 24 hours a day, this spew comes out of their radios, and it is it has done more to damage the country over the last 20 years. Really, because it set this up. It set up what we have. It set up a system where someone like Trump could be elected.
Yes.
Where people were just tired of, I'm tired of this smart president. People were tired of having a smart president. And they don't like a guy who gets up and he's talking. And even though Obama would dumb down his comments when he made them publicly, he didn't speak like he really could. Still, a lot of people didn't understand what he had to say. Trump, they understand what he means, even though he doesn't often complete a sentence. He really doesn't. He just talks.
Facts in reality, because
no facts, and doesn't even finish. He doesn't have a cogent thought. He interrupts himself constantly to talk about what a great job he's doing about this or that.
You'll see it. You'll see it. He'll be on the teleprompter and then go out to the left field. And the teleprompter is like, well, I guess I'll pause here. And you see it when it happens. It's obvious. But now, that being said, kind of keeping it, obviously, we do a sports show. I want to talk there, and this is a question I received from a young lady. She says, and I think I get the point. We haven't heard from Colin Kaepernick, except for the fact that he is going to pay for legal fees for those that are arrested or need up in Minnesota. And my wonder and my thinking is, being the layman that I am, is that that's a pretty interesting statement, because we haven't seen Colin Kaepernick out there walking, marching, doing it. Is this a drop of the ball from Colin Kaepernick and not being able to get out there? Because that's what people are thinking, that Colin Kaepernick is not really getting his nose, into the middle of this.
All right, how many of those people like him? I mean, are they people that have already kind of made up their mind about Colin Kaepernick, or are they truly people who are fans of his that are disappointed that he hasn't done this?
Well, that's a good point. I guess maybe I'm thinking, being the layman that I am, is I think Dr. King would be there. I think he'd be out there.
But he ain't Dr. King.
Exactly.
Man, he's a football player.
Exactly.
And he has not wanted to lead this fight. He has wanted to support it. He has wanted to call attention to it. But he's been realistic about his role. And let's also, he is also a lightning rod. He gets out there. Now suddenly a bunch of people who might have been neutral on the protests, now they're anti the protest because Colin Kaepernick is out there. And so I don't know. I think that what he did was supportive. So I'm willing to help what I can. And I think that if people go to him and ask him to get involved, I think he might. I think that there is certainly the irony of an officer kneeling on this guy's neck. And you've seen a million times on Facebook that played next to this, Colin Kaepernick kneeling and saying, if you're okay with this and you're not okay with this, then you're part of the problem. I think that's been very interesting, that this was not a shooting or even a strangulation by, arm or, headlock or whatever, but this was done kneeling, and that it brought Kaepernick into the conversation kind of just because of that. So, this is also a very fluid situation, and we'll have to see what happens with it. But do you want to talk about sports and COVID and sports coming back, or have we? How long do you have on this thing? How long can we go?
I leave Sunday open. We normally do a 3-hour show. Now, granted, I don't expect you to hang around with us for 3 hours, but as long as you can, or what. I know you had an appointment. Do you have to get to that appointment?
No, I'm bumping that. I'm moving that.
All right, so we're good. He's doing it now. You see him.
I'm doing it right now.
Got it. So let's do that. Let's talk COVID. It's a big subject. Obviously, it affects, with what I do with an indoor football league and champions indoor football, people are trying to hold on for some type of grasp of having games. The NFL has already come out and said they are going to have games. They are going to have crowds. The question is that if that ends up happening, John, that's got to back up the season, because I don't think they're going to be ready to rock and roll to do that. Although if you go back into history, and I forget what year it is, it might be 1913, maybe 1912, where you've seen the picture of the fans in the stands with the masks on. So that being said, I mean, do you think we'll take that step back? Is that how we're going to have the fans in? I think we're going to see a different looking fan. We're going to see a lot of people with masks out there. Do you think that happens?
Well, I think a bunch of things. One is that if this continues to be Republicans don't wear masks and Democrats do, then you won't see masks at football games. I mean, football is more of a Republican game than any of the other games. The owners are very, right wing, and
that's a good point.
And despite the fact that the players are like 80% African American, and I have no doubt that's why the NBA is trying to work something out, MLB is trying to work something out, NFL's like, we're playing.
Yeah.
So now, and I understand why they have to plan to play, just like colleges have to plan to play, because if you can, then you need to, right? And if you're planning not to play and then suddenly you can, you're not ready to. So I get that they need to plan to play, and they need to say they're going to play because they're going to sell tickets, right? There's no way they're going to have fans in the stands in the fall. No way. And I don't think you can start that season 2 months later, because then you're playing it over winter and into winter months. And, you have to deal with football in the winter a little bit, in the playoffs in December, January. But to have regular season games in December, January, and then your Super Bowls like in March, I don't know how you do that. And my belief is that because what we talked about earlier, didn't lock down soon enough, didn't lock down tight enough, let it up too early, we're gonna have a situation with COVID that's as bad or worse than it is right now in the fall. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of that. I don't think any of the sports are going to be able to make it back. Now the NBA is trying to do it in a bubble.
Yes, I've seen that.
And they might be able to pull that off because a limited number of people, players. If you don't have crowds, then there's a lot of other people you don't have to have. But that's going to be dicey. And I remember one of the first things Adam Silver said is, until testing is available nationwide and easy, we can't do this, because we're going to have to test our people every day, and you can't take tests away from people who might be sick and need them, showing symptoms, so that we can play basketball. So how close are we to that, Sonny? How close are we to you being able to just drive down to the local CVS and get tested for this through the drive-through if you want to? I don't think we're really close to that.
I don't think we are either. We're so far behind, and that's another thing about
And the irony of that, Sonny, is Trump has fought that the hardest and the longest.
Yeah, he has. That surprises me, because if you go back and you look at some of the other countries and some of the experts on what they're saying is that the more tests that we can get out there, and we can figure out how to proceed. And it seems like he's taken the step back, that he's not even worried about how to proceed against this now. Like you said, I think he's more worried about his re-election campaign than he is about the American people in this country. And I think that's where people are. I think even people who are on the fence about Donald Trump sees what's going on regarding COVID, sees what's going on regarding the protests and things. They're swaying to go, geez, we have got to figure something else out. And it can't can we do another 4 years of this just within the last 3 months? Can we do another 4 years? We can be caught up in the middle of that. And I think that's where that part goes. It's one of those scary things that people got to worry about.
Well, it's ironic that the single thing that would have helped him reopen the country and get us all back out there before November is the thing he's fought the hardest, and that's the testing.
Yeah.
That will be the thing, that the lack of which has kept this country, because again, restaurants are open. I'm not ready to go to a restaurant and sit in a restaurant with a bunch of people who are not wearing masks, because you can't eat with a mask on, right? You go to the grocery store with a mask on, you can't eat with a mask on. And if I'm a worker in a restaurant, I am not feeling really comfortable with that. And so there are a lot of businesses that are opening that are not going to do well, at least for a while, because people aren't ready to go do it. Now, I got a haircut. I am happy to say I needed one, man. It had been 3 months, and I have a different hair problem than you do.
Yeah.
My hair explodes.
I have a
So,
rage.
but I had to bring a mask and ask my person to wear it. She was not wearing one.
Wow.
And I know that in most states, including even Georgia, hairstylists were supposed to wear masks, and there are companies. She's a single person in a single room, so she doesn't have a company telling her what to do, but there are health guidelines, and they didn't state that you had to wear a mask. And it was her second day open that I went. I don't know if I would go now. If she's had a month of being in that room, not wearing a mask, not insisting that her clients wear a mask, and she can clean all she wants, I don't think I would be going to get a haircut in the next couple of months, 3 months for that. So,
Do you think
so
is that
it's
because of your
I
age?
am just going to be super careful.
Do you think that's because of
What?
your age? I ask if you think that's because of your age, because I'm 53. I think if I was younger, I'd probably risk it because I was stupid. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit smarter, but I don't feel comfortable going into Walmart. And as much as I think I felt okay when I did go out to lunch, I walked away from the experience, glad I seen my friend, but then I was shaking my head, why did I do this? And then now I'm back in the phase where I just don't feel comfortable, and I think it's because of our age, and if you look at most of the people who are not wearing masks, I hate to admit it, but it's young people who are not wearing the masks. I mean, whether that's from the top down, I mean, because you see Trump not wearing it, Pence, where they told him he needed to wear it and he refused to wear it, and all this other nonsense. I think that's where they get it. They get the fact that they could get away with not wearing the mask because they're young and and they have that. But me as a 53-year-old man, I don't feel I just don't feel safe right now.
Well, I don't think it's because of my age at all, but partly because I am 59, but I'm not. I don't think of myself as an older person. I have no underlying health issues. That's not it. It's just I see a lot of things, and I post stuff. There's a guy named Kurt Bianchi who I met actually on the Obama campaign in 2018. He was the photographer out in California for this Obama headquarters that I was making phone calls from to try to help Obama get elected. And we've stayed in touch. And he every day publishes on Facebook the new stats for the day on Santa Clara County where he lives. Mm-hmm. And then he also includes a photo and a write-up on somebody that passed away. And it might be a nationally known person. It could be a local person.
Yeah, I see those on your list. Mm-hmm.
Often those people are under 50 years old. Often. Yeah. So I'm not at all comfortable with the fact that that it's an age thing. You don't want this disease. People, I mean, Olympic athletes who have had it, don't feel the same after they get rid of it. You don't want this disease. Period.
Some of those photos are scary, by the way. With them laying face down and stuff. Thinking that if you actually get a look at it and you think about it and you go, they're scary to me just looking at the pictures.
Well, yeah, and if you read some of the first-person accounts, there was an incredible piece on CNN a week ago about a guy whose father was on a ventilator for 30 days, and this guy went through it day by day with you, and having to talk to his mother and to his father's friends and to the doctors and all this. And this is a smart guy, reporter, and he wrote this thing. And then his father was getting better, got off the ventilator, and was out of ICU, and then just died. And
wow.
He was 69, I think. And people need to really read about this disease, about the people who've had it and died from it, the people who've survived it, family members, what it's been like, people who've had their parents die and they can't have a funeral, people whose parents have died alone in a hospital. You don't want this disease. And for people to be so cavalier. And Sonny, I would stay out of Walmart. Actually, I would stay out of Walmart the rest of your life. I mean, Walmart's one of the worst actors, corporate, and we have in the country, and they always have been. And any dollar you spend at a Walmart is going to wind up in a bad place. It just is. So find another grocery store.
Okay.
In Dallas, you got a million of them. And also, it is one of the worst places to be during this. because you have a lot of undereducated people going to Walmart.
Yeah.
And Walmart, they're going to not only not wear a mask, they're going to go stand next to you. And that I've talked to people who have had to fight their way around a Walmart to keep people from crowding them because the people just.
I see it. You're right, because I know I make the effort on the social distancing, and and I wear the mask, the good mask, not the one that's not doing good. And there is no effort. There is no,
right.
They're just going up and down, and
yeah,
it's
so
fearful for me.
Stay out of there. Go to Trader Joe's. Find, and actually, right? Better yet, we have a grocery store here called Hy-Vee that delivers.
Yeah, delivery.
It costs a little more, but we get our deliveries now from Hy-Vee and Costco. And I go to Trader Joe's because they don't deliver, and because there are a few things that we've been eating at Trader Joe's for 20 years and we really like. And they are super careful. They only let a certain number of people in the store. They've got their check stands all straightened out. They've got the arrows on the floor, the direction you're supposed to go.
Yep.
And so, I feel safe in there, but I can't emphasize enough. You don't want this thing, and you don't want to mess around with it, and you don't want to get it and then bring it home to your family. That's the other thing. I mean, every time I go out, my wife's like, remember, whatever you get, I get.
Yeah.
And
that's what I was telling people. We got a lot of people that talk. Obviously, you get on social media and people talk. And, granted, hey, that's what social media is. And I haven't really jumped into my opinions about what's going on for the last 4 days. Okay. I just keep that and just look and learn. But one of the things that people start talking about is I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And what I try to tell people is, well, okay, let's say you don't want to do this. I would really hate for you to do something and catch this and give it to somebody else, and forget about somebody else. How about someone that you love? How about your family member, your direct family members, people that, and then all of a sudden they're not with you anymore. I can't even fathom the thinking of that I would be responsible for that. Now, granted, whether or not I could prove it or not, but it's part of the problem, and that's the reason why it scares me.
Well, and Sonny, I think that's very well said. And I think that one of the things that has frustrated me from the beginning of this is everyone is talking about, the economy, my job, this and that. Well, you know what? You just want to go to a bar. I mean, when that bar opened up in Wisconsin and all those people poured in there. I
saw the pictures.
They weren't worried about the economy. They just wanted to go to a bar. And, this country was at war for 5 years in the 40s and had to make great sacrifices, rationing of goods. On the West Coast, they had blackouts every night. They had to, have blackout shades so that no lights shone. They had curfews, and people suffered. Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps where they still sat there and rooted for the USA to beat Japan in the war, even though they were locked in internment camps. And now people, can't go 50 days without going to a bar. It's embarrassing. What this country has sunk to, that people are so unwilling
gratification
to make a sacrifice. Yeah, self-gratification. I want it now. But again, when you have a president whose id controls everything he does, from his Twitter feed to his speeches. Here's the thing. His COVID speeches were a disaster, but they were a daily reminder that this thing was going on. And I believe that since he stopped doing them, the situation's gotten worse in the country because people don't have that daily reminder that, hey, this is still a thing. It's like, the president's not doing that anymore. Things have got to be better. And I read today that the CDC is going to go back to daily reports. Now, whether they're going to be covered, Fox News won't cover them, I'll guarantee you. But that's a problem.
A reminder of why not to vote for Trump. I mean, you can sit there and listen to what he says and how he says it and what he says. And now okay, and I'll say this: the stupidity of some of the people that live in our country. Okay, we have got overabundance of stupid people that would do this. I mean, obviously, you just read the reports of people injecting themselves with disinfectant. Now, granted, Trump said it, and but if you're that stupid, I wonder how you live in this day and age, to do something like that. Even though Donald Trump says, yeah, maybe we should do that, and people are actually doing this, and that's what's. And I don't know if I want to put that on Trump. I want to put that on the stupidity of our country, because we lived in a day and age where you knew what you should and should not do. But I'm not stupid. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take the fork and put it in the electric outlet. I mean, I'm smarter than that. It's amazing how this country is not smarter than that. That scares me.
Well, but they're two sides of the same coin. We wouldn't have Trump if we didn't have the other problem.
Well, that's
really.
a good
Because if people, anybody that did any research into Trump before the election would not have voted for him.
Absolutely.
Because again, I said earlier, he's a businessman. He was a terrible businessman.
Horrible.
And he was a cheater. He cheated people. That was his business plan, was get people to do work for him and then not pay him. Yep. That's his business plan. And his money came from his father to begin with, and then from banks who, because he already had money, banks will always lend you money. And again, I'm a mortgage broker. Banks will always lend you money if you have it. If you need it and you don't have it, it's a lot harder to get it from them. So he had it, so he was able to get more. And then he's in a situation.
Information that he gave to the bank in order to get it, because there are many instances out there where it has been proven that he lied up on the applications in order to get the money.
Plus, lenders started to lend him money because they had already lent him money, and they didn't want him to fail, because then they wouldn't get the first money back. That's a tough position to be in, right? What are you going to do? You give him more money to keep him from going bankrupt, so you have a chance to get all, because he's going to get some big score at some point. He's going to pay you back. Well, he never did. Deutsche Bank is into him for billions. So anyway, that's people thought he was a businessman, but they weren't paying attention. They weren't looking at what this guy really has been his whole life and career, which is a cheat and a self-dealer. And so that's why we got him. So all those stupid people, that's part of the problem. And you can't save them from themselves. People that are going to drink that stuff or put the fork in the outlet, you can't save them from this. You can tell them you got to wear a seatbelt. You can make that a law. And it's amazing people will do that. They won't wear a mask.
Or more that don't vote, who see that the infringement of their rights is the reason why they'll vote for Trump. That was one of the things that I saw. But could you imagine this, John? Only reason why I thought of this is because you worked in the Obama campaign. Could you imagine Obama entering in this race with the background that Donald Trump had? This guy wouldn't have a snowball chance in hell to win the election with the background that Donald Trump had if he was Obama.
If Obama had done any one of the thousands of things that Trump has done in the 3.5 years, he would have been impeached in a heartbeat. And Democrats would have allowed it. Democrats would have followed it.
Yeah.
I mean, if he did what Trump did, Democrats would have been leading the charge to get him out.
Yep.
And instead, the Republicans are okay with it.
Or he wouldn't have even been elected in the first place. He's unelectable. And that's what surprises me about this whole thing. Again, me being the layman that I am, I'm not jumping in. I don't know a lot about politics or anything else, but I look at the background, and all you got to do is read it in different places. Don't just read one place, read in different places about the history of this man. And if Obama had that background, that guy is unelectable. There's no way he'd be in office.
There's no way any other person than Trump could have been elected with that background. But he was able to, partly because of the media that he has assailed ever since he got in. Well, CNN facilitated his candidacy. He was on CNN all the time during the primary months. Anytime he called in, they put him on the air because he was good TV. And he got a chance to talk, and nobody was asking him any kind of tough questions. It was ha ha la la, and these other guys, these other Republicans were grinding their gears in these small states trying to beat him. And he was on CNN, and he was even on MSNBC. Scarborough had him on a lot in the mornings on MSNBC, and of course he could go on Fox whenever he wanted. So the media that is now inconvenient for him is the reason he became president, because they allowed, and even the New York Times, which he hates and which a lot of people think is a Democratic or liberal newspaper, they wrote lots of pieces about Clinton that were negative, about the emails. They kept covering the emails, even though every investigation came out that nothing wrong happened with the emails. They kept covering them, and they kept this Trump thing going. As you know, Trump, the maverick, guy. They actually wrote a piece right before the election about Clinton and how if Clinton was elected, what kind of people would come into the administration. Would they be the Bill Clinton people? And some of them were kind of sketchy and this and that. Clinton brought in criminals to actually be in his cabinet. His cabinet is full of people who have been convicted of frauds and have been sued for everything you can imagine. They've got an education secretary who has basically tried to destroy public education since she got there. There is, the Department of Energy secretary doesn't think there should be a Department of Energy. The Department of HUD, my department, housing, Ben Carson is the neurosurgeon, has no idea about housing.
I agree.
And is one of the least black people in the world. And so that's what people don't understand is if you get Trump out of there and you get Biden in, whether or not you like Biden, you're going to suddenly have professionals in those positions. You're going to have professionals running the FDA and running the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which Trump has tried to gut. And I'm sorry, that doesn't help anybody but banks. If you gut the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, all of us lose from that unless you own a bank. And all of the agencies that right now are run by cronies of Trump. And again, there's a guy named Mark Calabrio, I think is his name. He's the head of basically the agency that oversees Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA lending. And he's under Carson in HUD. And we've had a real crisis the last couple of months with mortgage rates going down really low. And that created a lot of churning where people were getting refinances. They were paying off their current loans in such large numbers that servicers, the people who send out the bill every month, they were starting to lose their businesses. The way servicing works is you're a company and you buy a bunch of loans, $1 billion worth of loans, and you pay 3% of that amount, $3 billion, to get those loans. And you know that it's going to take you 3 years of sending bills out on those loans before you get your money back. And then after that, you make money. And they've got it all figured out. They know how many of those loans are going to fall off and what their cost is going to be for that. They've got it all figured out. Well, suddenly, in February and March of this year, those numbers tripled, quadrupled. I mean, those people had just gotten a loan. I did a number of loans for people I did a year ago, and now I was doing them again. And so the servicers who bought the servicing rights to those loans, they lost money on those loans, and a lot of times that $3 billion that they spend up front is leveraged. It's borrowed, and they borrow it based on what they're going to make back and pay it back, right? Well, now they weren't able to pay it back, and so companies were starting to really be threatened to go out of business. And this guy made 3 or 4 decisions at the very beginning that each one made it worse. And it's like you can hire a lackey, a crony of Trump, and maybe you get away with it. Maybe 4 years, 8 years go by. Nothing happens in those industries under that guy where you really need leadership. But sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need somebody super smart in that position. And there is no one in that administration left that is super smart. And that's one of the reasons why the country is in the trouble that it's in.
Let me ask you one question. Let's say we figure out how to win this election and get Donald Trump out of there. Who's the next to slide in your opinion? Who's the next to slide into the Republican ticket? Because the one I think is, going to be that Jim Jordan scares me. As a human being, Jim Jordan scares me.
He can never.
I don't know what it is. I'll sit there and I'll watch him and go, my gosh, I think he's trying to prime himself to be Trump Jr. That's what scares me. Who's the next in line on the Republican side? I'm
going to tell you, there's not another Trump out there. I mean, there's no one with the combination of presence, name recognition,
good point.
glibness, where if you're not really paying attention to what he says, you can be fooled by the word salad that he's got going. Okay. I don't see a Republican out there Pence scares me because he's a zealot, religious wise,
Okay.
and he's smarter than Trump.
Yes.
So I mean, there are a lot of things that would have been a lot worse if Trump wasn't as stupid as he is. If someone with Trump's overall feeling about the world, but with cunning, if that ever gets rolled into one package, we could really be in a lot of trouble as a democracy, and that really could be the end of the election process as we know it. So I would prefer to think that, again, as with Obama, we had the Democrats had to save the country. People don't remember that, but Obama saved the country in 2008 with the stimulus package, which was not as good as he wanted it to be. The Republicans kept cutting it back. It still worked. It helped, but it allowed the banks, which were way over leveraged, to continue to be so. And basically the banks that created all those problems that we had from 06, 07, 08, those guys didn't pay for that at all, financially or with jobs or with prison sentences, which they should have. But Obama saved the auto industry, which again, Republicans didn't want him to give all that money to the auto industry, saved it. And he saved housing. Fannie and Freddie were both headed for receivership.
Yep. And
they wound up with the ability to refinance your loan. It was called it wasn't TARP, but it was something like the HARP, Housing Asset Relief Program or something, where even if you owed 150 and your house was worth 120, you could still refinance it and get your rate down, because rates had gone down a lot. Right. And that helped people not lose their homes. And Fannie and Freddie wound up making a lot of money for the government because of the way it was structured under Obama. And people just think, Sonny, this country can run itself. And it can't. It needs people, smart people in government, and which is getting harder and harder to find because people aren't respected for being in government anymore.
Yep.
You know, people think, oh, if you're in government, you must not be able to get a real job. And it's like, wait a minute, this is important.
So you made a statement in your last, what you were talking about just in this last time. The statement is that, you know, I guess the question I have is there really a chance that we could see the end of the election process? I mean, we've been hearing about it. I mean, even if you're not paying attention, you know this is a topic of discussion. What do you think the chances of this country losing the election process going on?
I wouldn't rule out anything with Bill Barr as a Department of Justice, which has really become the Department of Injustice, with the firing of all the inspectors general, whose job it is to watch the government on our behalf and make sure the things that are being done are legal. And let's remember that $2 trillion stimulus bill that came out right away on COVID. The next day, he fired the guy that was supposed to oversee where that money went.
Exactly.
And a lot of that money's gone to his donors, his cronies, people who own, private jet companies, and not to restaurants and companies who are really hard hit, and people who are really hard hit by that. And now, Turtleface from Kentucky. Why can't I think of his name?
I know who you're thinking of. I read the article. Yes. Yeah.
He's already said that the next stimulus bill will be the last. He's already said that. We have no idea, Sonny, how long this thing's going to go, how much help people are going to need.
John, it's not going to happen. Look at what's going on in the country right now because of the protests and stuff like that. And look at the amounts of money that, in reality, someone's going to have to make up. And there's no way there's going to be a second stimulus put out there. I don't see it. And maybe it's because I'm not an optimist like you are. But I see where all the money is going, and it's not going to the right places. And if they do decide to go ahead and approve it, it won't get to the people that need it, which are the people of this country.
Well, I agree that it's an uphill battle because of the Republicans, and that's where I don't get why people say, oh, you know what, I don't really trust either party. That just doesn't work anymore. And if it worked before the impeachment, it really doesn't work after the impeachment. I mean, there's a party trying to save this country, and there's a party trying to keep that from happening. And it's very clear which one is which.
Absolutely.
And the Democrats are also trying to save people, and they're going to keep putting this in front of McConnell. And and at some point, it's going to become politically damaging for them not to do it. And now Pelosi gets screamed at from her left, from the radical part of the Democratic House, that this doesn't go far enough, or it doesn't help the right people, or she can't win either. And that's kind of her litmus test of, okay, the Republicans are going to hate everything I do. If enough people on my left hate it also, I probably have something that the rest of America could live with.
Right.
So, we'll see what happens. But what I mean is, for his arrogance to say, this, if we do another one, it will be the last, when you don't know how long this thing's going to last. The Republicans have thought from the beginning that they could decide when COVID was over.
Absolutely.
And Fauci said it. Yeah. He's the one that said the virus decides when it's over and when you can reopen. And all you can do is try to impact that by doing these things that, by the way, the Republicans want to stop doing. So what they're signing up for, Sonny, is a very long fall and winter.
I agree.
Of social distancing and people working from home and businesses in trouble, and in that thing somewhere, we better have an election. Kushner was the one that already said, we might have to push back the date of the election. And he was told very quickly that, number one, that's not a executive branch decision. No. That's not something the executive branch can do. And number two, you're just a guy. You're the president's son-in-law. You don't get to do anything like that.
Yep.
So, but that was a trial balloon. That was, let's see if anybody notices that, that we've said this.
Because, like you said, the executive branch can't do that, but they've been doing a lot of things that they can't do.
That's true.
With it, where is the stand? Why are they allowing these kind of things to happen? Because, like you said, if this is a decision that's got to be made by a different party or a different area within our branches, how come they are not getting in front of them when the issues are being brought up? I don't get that either. As being a layman, it's like, wait a second, we know this has got to go this way. It's not going that way. It's going to Trump, and he's just saying, okay, let's do it.
Right. Okay. So I get that frustration, and I find it very interesting that he did it took him 24 hours to do an executive order about Twitter.
Yeah.
And it took him 3 months to do an executive order to get more PPE to the hospitals. So we know what his priorities are, but that particular thing, our election, is to move or cancel an election would have to be agreed on by all, by the House, the Senate, and the White House. And the House is in a reliably Democratic hands, and you'd never get 40 Democrats to vote to delay the election at the request of Trump. So the Senate would pass it, the House would not, and the administration can't he can't do that by executive order, I don't believe. Now, are they working on it? I wouldn't be surprised. But and the problem is that to protest that now, you have to look at these protests and say, well, if we protest this, what's going to happen? What are we all going to get killed? Are we going to get masked? Are we going to get tear gassed? Are we going to have rubber bullets, fired at our faces? What happens if they to move the election or delay the election or cancel the election? What means do we have to really protest that? And it's a question I don't have the answer to, because you may call me the expert on for the purposes of this hour and a half, but I would not begin to try to tangle that.
I want to take a step back to voting just really quick, because the mail-in. I am one, because I guess maybe it's that I don't trust our president, okay, to tell us the truth or whatever. So that theory that I have, that I don't trust whatever he says, and Trump says I don't want the voting, I don't want that. There's something in the back of my head says, wait a second, that's just too easy for him. He wants this. If it could end up happening, I would think he really wants that.
He wants what?
He wants the mail-in.
No, he doesn't. Now, there's a bunch of reasons. Number one, the voting machines are very easy to corrupt, and they've been corrupted. Diebold is a company that makes a lot of these machines. There's tons of stuff on the internet about voting machines, and especially if you don't have paper ballots as a backup.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do recounts. That, so a mail-in ballot by nature is going to be a paper ballot that can be recounted. So no, what he wants is for people to have to go vote, because the more you expand the ways you can vote, the more people can vote. The more people can vote, the worse it is for the Republicans, because there are fewer of them. I mean, by a lot.
But
so they want to have people not be able to vote because they can't get off work, because they can't get childcare, because they can't stand in a line for enough hours. Because what they do is they go and they in these Republican areas, they shut down voting precincts, and especially ones, a lot of these districts in southern states are gerrymandered, and northern states too are gerrymandered. And so the Republicans, even though there are fewer of them, they still have the power, because they've arranged to have these districts where, okay, we're going to make all the Democrats who live all in this area, we're going to make that one district. And then we're going to have all these small areas that Republicans live in. Those are going to be different districts. And now you got 5 Republicans in the House and you got 1 Democrat.
And we've seen the borders of those move quite often through the years. And
we've seen court decisions where they've had to redraw them because they're unfair. But in a lot of cases, they're still in play. So they are able to, in that Democratic district, limit the number of precincts. So that means longer lines. That means people have to have transportation to get there. And I remember in Kansas in 2016, there was a thing, people had to drive 20 miles to get, the only precinct that was available in this county was way away from the only town in the county. And they all had to schlep all the way out to vote. They want to make it as difficult as possible for people to vote, because they know that helps them. And they want people also, with this COVID thing, they want people who will go to vote regardless of COVID. Now, you tell me what party those people are more likely to be members of.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. But okay, go back to the pessimist in me, which I am. I'm more of a glass empty kind of guy than it is quite full. But parts of me makes me wonder if in the back of his mind that Trump does want, so he can figure out a way to cheat the voting. So explain to me, the layman that it is, you kind of explained it a little bit, but I just see that as a way of corruption of dead people who've been dead are voting now and everything else. And I can see, and not only do I see Trump doing that, but I can also see, the Democrats actually taking advantage of that as well, to open the door for voter fraud. And I know we have not had a big percentage of that, but if they open it up like this, there's something inside of me that says they want this so they can figure out a way to stuff the ballot.
Sonny, he's trying to not only kill voter mailing, he's trying to kill the post office.
I knew that.
Right. And that goes hand in hand. I mean, if he can kill the post office, then he doesn't have to worry about mail-in balloting, right? Yeah. So we have had absentee balloting
for years.
Generations.
Yeah,
people vote from overseas if they're traveling, and no one's ever said a word about voter fraud with that.
Right.
I have gotten an absentee ballot almost every election that I've ever voted in, and sometimes I would drop it off in person, but I would receive my vote in the mail, my ballot in the mail, have my name on it, right, and I would go and I would turn it in. I have to be registered to vote to get one,
right,
and it has to. And I have to sign it for it to count. It's really pretty foolproof.
Okay.
That's what scares him. He wants people to have to go, because look, all those poor people who have a job that their boss is supposed to let them get off to go vote.
That's
but
true.
What if they don't?
Yep.
What's the recourse if they don't? Are you going to quit your job to be able to vote? Probably not. People in Wisconsin risked their health to go vote in that election where the governor was trying to make it where they wanted to delay it, right? The Republicans forced it to happen. Right. People went, they risked their health, and they had a spike in COVID after the election.
And some of those polling places weren't even open as well.
Right, because they couldn't find enough people to work. Because who works at the polling places? Old people, right? Yep. They're not going to go out and volunteer to get sick. they're, and so you can't get enough people to work these things. You got to have a mail-in vote this time. You have to. And there's no reason not to, except that Trump doesn't want it and the Republicans don't want it. And they have a lot of governorships and a lot of Secretary of State's offices are Republican. And it's, and that's, the vote is the most precious thing we have in a democracy. And when that gets tampered with, like it has been, and it was tampered with in 2016, and there's proof
Absolutely.
that it was tampered in certain states, and it was tampered by the Russians in terms of trying to change people's minds with the complicity of the Trump campaign. And that's true fact and obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that they've tried to say that has controverted that has actually been debunked.
Yeah.
And now what the other answer is, get rid of all the FBI guys who worked on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's baffling to me that people are so busy in their own little worlds. All they can think about is, God, I really wish I could go out and have a beer. I really wish I wish they'd play football.
Yeah.
I miss football. Well, yeah, I miss football. Not like I used to, but I feel for it, and baseball, it'd be great. But how do you really do it?
Right.
How do you really play and keep everybody safe? And how do you have enough testing to do that when you don't have enough testing for people who are sick?
That being said, okay, I got two more questions. I'll probably take it up there. I'll make the last one sports. But what you just said about that whole thing, I see where there is an opportunity for this kind of stuff. But I wondered to myself, and this was an article. Actually, I'm going to bring the sports one up. I read an article about Colin Kaepernick to the Vikings and how that would be a great idea. I guess I'm going to ask, I get it. I understand it. Would it be great for the Vikings to do it? Do you really foresee, do you think that's a possibility? Colin Kaepernick to the Minnesota Vikings. And if it did happen, is it good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, I think it would be good if somebody gave Colin Kaepernick a chance in the NFL.
Right.
I have been one of the people who said I understand why they haven't, because he has been such a lightning rod that if you signed him, it doesn't take a lot of protesters, as we're learning, it doesn't take a lot of protesters to cause big problems for businesses and teams. And you'd have 30 people in your parking lot an hour later at your team headquarters marching around with signs about how could you do this. There would be people in the parking lot at whatever bank was your big bank sponsor for the Vikings or whatever team it was. There would be people, maybe 15 people in all of those branch parking lots marching around about how could you do this, causing problems for the banks and in their branches. Teams don't want that. Sponsors don't want that. And I believe that's the biggest reason why Colin Kaepernick has not been offered a contract, is because public outcry would be so great. Now, this does change a little bit with this. That now if you sign him, you may still have some people protesting it, but I don't think they're going to protest as vehemently. It's really hard to go out there right now and say this guy who protested against racial injustice by police officers was wrong, right? And that's
a good point.
Now, and on the other hand, you may get people supporting your decision and letting the team know and letting sponsors know, hey, we support that decision. We've really been watching what's going on. We don't think it's fair. And now, you give them a chance. So I think, I don't know if it will happen because the NFL is such a racist organization. I'm sorry, they just are. But I could see where it would be great if one team took a chance and did it. And maybe it's got to be San Francisco or someplace in a city that is more liberal than you'd see in Dallas or in someplace. I mean, you could maybe do it in Atlanta. I don't know. You don't want to alienate your fan base. That's what teams worry about.
Yep.
But it's really hard right now to say that Colin Kaepernick was wrong. That what he knelt for 4 years ago, that wasn't a thing. It's really hard to make that case right now. But you know what? Sonny, people make a lot of cases that aren't really cases all the time, especially on social media. They do it. They don't let the truth get in the way of a good rant.
Right, it's a good point because we see it all the time. So now, obviously, really quick, looking at the NBA, we briefly talked about it, the NBA thinking about maybe just throwing everybody down in Florida, get them over there in Disney World, let them do that. And I don't know if you've seen the NHL, kind of how they want to do the setup for their playoffs. I don't know how much you dip into the NHL, but the NBA, it's a big story, trying to figure that portion out of it. I guess I got to ask, because I am a wrestling fan. I haven't watched wrestling because there have not been fans in the stands. I wonder, do you think that this sells very well on TV without any fans in the stands, whether it be hockey, football, or basketball?
That's a really good question. The soap operas and not soap operas, the sitcoms on TV figured out, 40 years ago that if you had a live sound of people laughing at a joke, people thought the joke was funnier.
Yep.
So it is hard to imagine what a place empty of fans would feel like. We have a nightclub here, a bar, a jazz club here in Des Moines called Noce, Noce, for people that love jazz, and they do live streaming twice a week, Wednesday nights and Saturday nights, and they have performances that we watch on our computer. Mm-hmm. And at the end of each number, the two people, person running the camera and another person who's there, manning the live stream, they clap, and it's weird. It's weird. You're enjoying this song, and then at the end of it, you get two people clapping, yep. And it's like, huh. So I don't know how that would work. You're going to hear the squeak of the shoes. Yeah. You're going to hear one thing that might be interesting. You hear players talking to each other. You'll hear people calling out defenses and all that, which you can't hear above high school. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how well that's going to work. And again, they have to solve the problem of having enough testing available for everyone, that daily testing of a few hundred people is not going to cut into that national effort to do testing, and I don't see how that works.
Me either, and that was, and you led it right where my last question was, is the fact that we have all this testing that's supposedly happening in order to get the right thing going on. I don't get that part of it as far as I'm concerned. We got I guess if you want to solve the entitled superstar getting the test, and people who need the test are not getting it. I just don't, I don't see how you justify the ends to make, to get there. It doesn't make sense to me. And maybe it is because I'm the layman. I'd much rather see some of those tests go to people who desperately need it.
And that's what Adam Silver said that 2 months ago when they were first starting to talk about this, and that the fact that they've thrown out a date now, mm-hmm. makes me think they've either got that figured out or they're on the way to getting it figured out. And I don't know what that answer is, because even if you buy the tests from some other country that maybe doesn't need them anymore, you still could have turned around and given them to our hospitals, right? Yeah. You bought them, you have them. Yes, you can use them, but people still need them. So I don't really have a good answer on how they're going to solve that.
Yeah. That part don't make very much sense to me. But then again, I see all this stuff, and I know I have an opinion, but I also know it's an uneducated opinion, more so than I'm not the brightest. Keep it in sports. I'll give you an opinion that's pretty much what I know, which is football or whatever we're covering. I can do that, and I think I'm all right at it. But when we get into this world of politics and everybody else, I find myself confused, because I can listen to one and I can listen to another. Yes, you have to go back and forth. I think you got to watch a little bit of the Fox thing. You got to watch a little bit of CNN, and if you can find a medium in the middle, would be wonderful.
Well, wait. CNN actually is the middle, Sonny. MSNBC is out on the left side. Okay. Although, let's remember, they have a 3-hour block in the morning run by a former Republican congressman, Joe Scarborough. So it's not like wall-to-wall liberal viewpoints, but their talk show hosts in the afternoon, in the evenings, do have a liberal viewpoint. They have a lot of writers on, though, And those writers write for the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and they talk about facts on their shows. And this is an interesting thing about CNN also, because the new press person for Trump, I can't remember her name, but she said something about how CNN broadcast something in 2017 that was wrong about Eric Trump and this and that. And what she didn't mean to do, but she did, was point up the difference between CNN and Trump. CNN acknowledged that mistake. They use their whole platform, TV, internet, everywhere else, to explain the mistake, apologize for the mistake. People get fired at places like CNN or the New York Times if something runs that's not wasn't fact checked. Dan Rather lost his whole career on one story about George Bush that he did not check well enough. He lost his career.
Right.
Things that are incorrect, untrue, are talked about on Fox all day long. They are backed, and Trump lies and says things that are not true all day long, never acknowledges, even when he's caught. Now, McConnell did come out after several days and say, yes, Obama left us a playbook and we didn't use it. He did. It took him several days.
Credit, by the way, which I can't stand that guy. But I gave him credit. At least they acknowledged they made the mistake.
They were so nailed, and it was so important. What they were accusing the Obama administration of was so important that they had to come out and do that. But Trump's never done it on something that he has said.
Oh, he won't. Yeah.
So if you're looking for a middle, it really is CNN. And again, they had Trump on all the time. They had Trump spokespeople. They had talking heads that did nothing but spout Republican jargon and Trump. They had him side by side with Democrats through the whole campaign thing and even after. And they've had to fire a lot of those people because they kept saying stuff that wasn't true, or they'd get in some kind of trouble outside of the TV. They do something else, and they had to fire them. And I don't think they have them on as much. I think CNN's gone much more to news and not the opinion stuff. And so you really have Fox on one side, and as far as opinion goes, you have MSNBC on the other. But they are doing interviews with reporters who are writing in mainstream newspapers and have to be fact checked. Mm-hmm. And then you've got CNN, which I look at as somewhere in the middle, because they do have opinion pieces from time to time that express Republican or Trump viewpoints, but there just aren't very many facts that back up anything that Trump and the Republicans are saying right now. So to say, well, you got to look in both places, it's tough, because that's really not our job. And boy, Jon Stewart blew up Crossfire on CNN about 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
They had him on, and it was Paul Begala and Tucker Carlson, the right-left thing, and they were having him on, and they were kind of having some fun. And he just said, this is crap. He said, what people watch is for the experts to tell them what the truth is. Mm-hmm. But for you to say this is truth, and you to say this is truth, and now I got to decide what the truth is, that's not fair. That's not my job. I have a job. I do my job all day, and I come home and I want to find out what happened today, not what you think happened and what you think happened. And so I'll be honest, I do not look at Fox ever. If there's a piece that's on Facebook that someone calls to my attention, you should see this, I will look at it, but I don't just look at Fox to see what they're saying, because it's a waste of my time.
Got it. Now, I'm going to ask one question about experts, supposed experts. Do you think some of the experts say certain things in order to keep their jobs? And I'm talking about the media, quote unquote experts. I mean, do you think that they got token papers before they get in there? I think so.
Oh,
I think so.
I think most of them. Most of them say what they think. Okay. I mean, I don't think you can be on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace and say how great Trump is, unless somebody's paying you. I don't think. I think if you're on MSNBC, let me start over. So Steve Schmidt was a former Republican strategist. Ran the McCain campaign in 2008 that failed. And somewhere between, I think it was around the time Trump got the nomination, might have been a little bit before that, he started popping up talking about Trump and how Trump would be a terrible president.
Mhm.
And he was imploring his Republican colleagues to not nominate him. And they did, of course. And he has spent the last 3 years, most of it, on television talking about what a disaster Trump has been. Now, he did go off TV for probably about a year where he was running one of the campaigns for one of the Democratic candidates. I don't remember which one it was. But people, I read a scathing thing about him. He did this great piece with Joy Reid a couple of days ago that just talked about Trump and historically and what a disaster this presidency has been for us in the world.
Right.
And somebody wrote, well, I don't, he was a Republican and he foisted Sarah Palin on us, and that was part of what got us here to where we are. And I don't believe anything that he says. I think he's just trying to make a buck. And I'm like, well, he made a buck talking about how great Trump is if he wanted to. Yeah. Somebody would pay him to say that. So I think he's choosing to make money saying what he really believes and what he thinks is best for the country, which is that Donald Trump go away. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that, I guess it's a sliding scale, Sonny. If they're not that smart or that good at what they're doing, then they're probably getting paid just because they're willing to say what they're willing to say.
Got it.
But if they are people who worked in the government, I mean, that's really what you see a lot of, again, on MSNBC, a lot of people who worked in the Obama administration. Some worked in the Bush administrations. Some worked in both.
Yep.
Nicole Wallace worked for Bush.
Yep.
And they are talking on behalf of government insiders saying, this is dangerous, what's going on here. And military people that are, going on MSNBC and saying, this guy is killing our country. Now on Fox, I don't really know who their current experts are, but I think there are a lot of people there that maybe don't have a lot else going on, and they're getting paid to go on and say, things are fine, and that's kind of their only option.
Toting the company line kind of thing. That might get it. So, well, first of all, I'm amazed we went 2 hours, and we could probably go 2 or 3 more. And again, I go back to the reason why I had you. I respect your opinion so much. Guys, you got to get on his Facebook because he will bring up some great stuff. I read it. There's some things I don't agree with, but at least I'm getting it. I'm hearing it, and I'm hearing from both sides. And I just want to, first of all, thanks for taking the time. 2 hours out of anybody's schedule, regardless of COVID, I very much appreciate. And hopefully, as I said before we came on, you'll use this format. I'll let you know how to do it. I would love for you to open up the John Cannon show. I really would. And I'd sit and I'd watch it if you did it. So, and I think other people would too. So just so that you know, you weren't just great at sports. You're really good at life. And I think you'd be great at this.
Well, Sonny, thank you. One of the things, and I was approached in Phoenix about doing a show on a news station after I quit doing sports talk. No, it was Bill Strauss was on it. I can't remember the call letters, but
I know who you're talking about, though.
Yeah. And the GM of that station called me and asked me, and the reason I didn't do it was that in sports, I had this lifetime of background.
Right.
That if someone called up and disagreed with me, like I said early in this broadcast, if anyone is still around from 2 hours ago, I didn't have to change my opinion because I knew that what this person was saying, while they were trying to argue a point, I could decide, is it valid or not based on my experience.
Right.
I don't have that in politics. Now I do more now than I probably did 20 years ago.
Yes.
Because I've just paid attention. But I don't have that lifetime of if somebody calls me up, and I'd be very easy to trip up. And to do a call-in show, especially. Now I could do an interview show like this, and I love your format. Hey, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Exactly.
You do. Inform me. I like that. I think that comes from a great place. I feel awkward being the expert in this conversation, but I also I really respect that, and I think that's a great way to go. So we all need more information. We all need to learn more. But I think right now that all of the experts in the health field are saying the same thing.
I agree.
And they're all saying, wear a mask.
Is it because Trump is saying don't listen to him? I mean,
absolutely.
Well, I mean, you have these experts,
Sonny,
you bring them on here, and you're not even backing what they're saying. It makes no sense to me.
remember, he's just trying to win.
Yeah.
That's all he's trying to do. He's not trying to save lives. He's not trying to get on top of this thing. He's trying to win. And he thinks, and one thing about this guy, his political instincts have been unbelievable. And his instinct is, I'm going to get away with this. And he's been right.
Oh, well,
he was right with Charlottesville. He was right, firing people. He's been right a lot more than he's been wrong. Yeah. And that's why it scares me about November. But in terms of why they don't listen to experts, they have been anti-science from the beginning. Pence is anti-science his whole career. And so they build this thing up where, again, and we talked about it, everybody's got an opinion now. And you see the memes on Facebook. Wow, all the doctors are saying we should do this, but this guy I went to high school with says we should do this, and it's really hard to decide. And while that's sarcastic, it really is what also happens, though, is when you're surrounded by people who don't want to wear a mask and think the whole thing is stupid. I got a friend who used to do a radio show in Seattle. He's got 4,000 Facebook followers. Now, he is following the rules, but he's griping about it every day. And I'm like, dude, 4,000 people see what you post on Facebook. You could be a force for good in this. If you're already wearing the mask, just say, hey, I'm wearing the mask, and I think it's a good idea. Instead of saying, I'm wearing the mask, nobody else is, this is stupid. Take yourself seriously here. You got 4,000 people that you have access to. And so far, he hasn't taken me up on that. But it's so when you see people that echo your doubts are going to get stronger. And right. It's too bad. But I just think the way that all fits together, I think we're headed to 200,000. I really do. I think we're halfway through this at best.
I get people telling me this all the time. And God, I'm holding you on again. I'm sorry. I get people say you can't trust the numbers that are coming out of China. Now that number is around 5,000. Now, I get where people are coming from that, because I guess you can't trust China. But even if that number was 10 times what it is, that'd be 50,000. And the population that's going on over there is compared to our 325 million is, what is it, 3.5 billion over there, and they only have 50,000. I mean, I just think of where this supposedly originated. They have 5,000, or I guess if you don't believe the numbers, 50,000 if you multiply it by 10. How did they get to only 50,000, and we're going over the borders at 100,000? It don't make any sense.
Part of it is that because of the nature of their government.
Okay.
One thing about that Chinese government is when they decide to do something,
they do it.
They do it. And like they decided to build more coal plants, and it's a big problem for the world pollution and climate change because China built a ton of coal plants. They make a decision about something, and it happens. And they made a decision that they were going to test like crazy. And anytime you walked into a building, you got your temperature taken. If you had a fever, you went over here, you got tested for everything except COVID. And if you didn't have anything except COVID, then you went to a different room, a different ward, really. And that's where you stayed. And you didn't get to call home. You didn't get to, finish your errand. That's where you stayed. And they did this, and they did it everywhere. And that's what that kind of government can do. Our government can't do that. We need people to willingly do this kind of stuff, and they're not willing.
Right. Yeah,
they're not willing. So that's why we have 100,000 on our way to 200,000, and they had 5,000 or 50. And here's the sad part: we can't trust China. Well, you know what? We can't trust us either. Absolutely. We can't trust Iowa. We're not getting right numbers from Iowa now. They're saying they're only going to tell us how many positive tests they have in these meatpacking plants if the media asks. They're not just going to say it. So that's something that our numbers, again, almost all the experts are saying our numbers are lower than they really are. That there are people who have died from COVID that never got tested, and we can't count that as COVID unless they really had the symptoms. But now we know people have had strokes from COVID. We've had people have had heart attacks from COVID. Those are not being counted as COVID deaths unless they got them tested, which they usually didn't. So our numbers are low, and people, again, because Fox News says our numbers are high, and that, I had a brother-in-law, a very smart guy, say, the doctors, they get paid more if they say it's a COVID death.
Yeah.
Like, where did you hear that? Well, you heard that on Fox News.
Yep.
It's and it's just so damaging. These healthcare professionals are on the line, and that's the one thing I wish I could just say, okay, all you people, just get together, don't wear a mask, go to a concert, have a good time, and you'll all get sick and die. But they're going to take other people with them, and they're going to make our first line responders in the medical community, more of them are going to die treating these stupid people. I mean, if you don't wear your seatbelt and you get in an accident and you're injured, you're going to go to the hospital. The person working on you in the hospital is not going to get sick.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, there you go.
I just
you're back.
I was talking with my hands and I hit my mute button. How about that? So anyway, so that's it keeps coming back to Americans.
Mm-hmm.
What are Americans willing to do to stay safe and keep each other safe? And the sad truth is, damn little, Sonny. They're willing to do damn little to keep each other and us safe.
The flu kills more people than COVID.
It's just not true.
And that's my point. I guess it just depends on where you look at the numbers or whatever the case may be. It's not true, but yes,
it's never been true, and it's never been true that the flu, that a flu season doesn't last 3 months. It lasts, when they do flu, they're talking about the whole year. This has been 3 months, 100,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, the people who argue against the numbers and argue about this, I don't worry about them because they're going to be proven wrong.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're just going to be. There's no sense debating with people about whether this is contagious or dangerous or what. I mean, and now the new numbers that, so many people have had it and already gotten over it. Well, no one has said you have immunity once you've had it. There are people in China and in South Korea that have had it before that are having it again. So what does that antibody test really mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
So I don't know, man. Did we solve anything?
Say again?
Did we solve anything?
I don't know.
I don't think we solved anything.
Well, I feel smarter.
I had fun.
A little bit smarter than I did coming into it, and that's the reason why I had you on there. I think there's a lot of people like me who are, we don't have a clue. We hear one thing, and I just want to be informed by someone who I know is smarter than me. So that's the reason why I had you on, and I'm glad you did. And again, start your show. It's streamlined. It's $25. It's easy.
I appreciate it.
You'll do a good job, and let me know when your premiere is. I'll be there watching.
I will.
You bet.
You'll be one of my first guests.
You bet.
Okay.
He is John.
You can educate me about wrestling and how wrestling is going to work in a COVID environment.
I actually have the inside scoop on that. I can do that for you. So
I know. See, I need to know because I don't know that. So, all right, man. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
John Cannon, and check him out. And I've been having his Facebook go across the bottom. Just put in John Cannon and look for the young John Cannon next to the stinking genius Artie Spanier. That picture, I knew who that was.
It is a 25-year-old picture. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Back in the middle 90s. We loved it. All right. Thanks, John. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, man. All right. Bye.
Gotcha. And guys, we did this. I did this for a reason because I do like John's opinions, and hopefully you learned something different side. Maybe he said something that you didn't know. I know he said a lot I didn't know. And that was really in reality, I did this show for myself, and hopefully it does something for everybody else. So now normally you're talking the Couch Potato Sports Show. Normally we are here, but that's going to do it for me, Sonny Clark, who is the hardest working man in sports radio. Everybody have a great day. We'll catch you next week, and maybe we'll do another one of these. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.